I wanted to give you a little bit of a context of what Statistics Canada, who we are, and what we do. For some of you probably have not heard of Statistics Canada, just a surprise. May 4th is when census starts. Okay, everyone's going to fill in their census. Fantastic. So you hear us every few years about a census, but we do more than just census. We do a lot of surveys. As you can see here, we have over 350 active surveys in the field. We also contain a lot of holdings on businesses and individuals within Statistics Canada. We're one of the largest data holders of information on Canadians and businesses. You also see that at the bottom, we work very, very much with our international partners. We're part of a larger group of statistical organizations around the world. We also lead the national statistical system across Canada, working with all of our federal partners and territorial partners and Indigenous partners on these domains. The fundamental principles of official statistics, yeah, I forgot my water, of official statistics speaks to some of those fundamental principles which we adhere to in terms of how we protect, how we use, and how we collect and manage information, and more specifically, statistical information. Okay. We have a public trust center on our website. This is very important. So as Chief Privacy Officer, one of the key things that I do is to make sure to demonstrate public trust in terms of all of our activities. I want to demonstrate on our website our administrative decision-making, our policy instruments, what we do with the data, etc. We want to demonstrate how our data governance practices are well-defined and well done. And you can see here a culture of responsible privacy. We all know, raise your hand those that know privacy by design. Okay, yay. It's a good crowd, fantastic. So everyone has seen privacy by design. We've worked with privacy by design concepts for the last 30 plus years. We've done, most of you have seen a privacy impact assessment, looking at nodding heads. You've lived the dream. Some of you have done maybe some other forms of privacy assessments, privacy protocols or records of determination or some other means. For us at StatCan, we do have a lot of privacy impact assessments. We've done quite a number of them. We have generic PIAs that cover our statistical business activities. We have other forms also. But I have to go further than that. I can't just rely on privacy by design in an organization. It's not a checkbox exercise. You have to turn around the organization in terms of a culture, a responsible culture. And I will need that water. Of responsible privacy. This means I have to change the organizational culture within the agency, within StatCan, so that all individuals at all levels have an understanding of how we build privacy within our daily activities. This is fundamental. Thank you. Our privacy management approach, as you see here in our temple almost, Greek with all sorts of columns. I decided to keep that to give you an idea of the complexity of some of our activities that we actually have to undertake within StatCan to actually make these practices live throughout the organization. You'll see at the top program controls. People don't like to hear program controls, but they're a very important part of an organizational culture. I have to take certain actions on certain components of the agency. I'll give you an example, de-identification. I maintain a very rigorous policy instrument to make sure that whenever data comes in, it is de-identified, not anonymized. I don't deal with anonymized data. It has no value for statistics, but I deal with de-identified information. I create registers. I create other means to actually de-identify and then use that information as timely needed. You'll also see a lot of training and awareness. That means over the last maybe few years, right, Shelley? Since maybe the pandemic, we've about changed 40% of the agency. This is new staff. If you have new employees, that means I have to train them up and I explain to them what the culture of Statistics Canada is in terms of confidentiality. I'm just going to be a newsflash for everyone in the room. It's not hard to explain to statisticians confidentiality. Okay? My job's a little bit easier when I have to explain confidentiality. Statistical disclosure limits. See, I'm usually using language. See, that's mad. Eh? So these are normal part of the toolkit for the employees. But I have to go and explain to them the impacts of what we're doing to Canadians. So there are consequences of us not following up on responsible privacy. I also want to mention there's a little bit here in terms of systems. Very small box. Most of what I'm talking about is part of an organizational culture. It's people-centered. The systems and tools that we deploy within the department are normal. Everyone wants to have better systems that actually protect the information, but they shouldn't be the stopgap. You first start with the organizational culture. So I'm giving you a little bit of an insight in terms of how we approach privacy here. Let's move on a little bit more. We want to build trust into our statistical programs. So the privacy management program, data information programs, and how we actually embed that within the organization. I like this sentence here, if I can. Trust does not come from system design alone. It comes from how institutions act ethically, transparently, and consistently over time. This is very important for us. We have to demonstrate both to Canadians and to our partners, our data providers, people who send us the data, that we are managing that data very confidentiality. If you're looking at our tables, we apply statistical disclosure limits to prevent people from re-identifying even businesses. You will not know how many critical minerals or how many people have lithium mines. Surprised? I think there's just one. But again, normally we have to apply statistical disclosure limits so you wouldn't be able to re-identify those businesses. Accountability to be real. Rules must align to accountabilities within the agency. I have the dubious honor of being one of the executives that can shut down a website if things are going wrong with a breach. You haven't seen the website. If it does go down, it's not because of me, okay? But the point is that we have certain accountabilities within agencies. Again, those need to be empowered, those need to be clarified. When you're looking at data governance within Statistics Canada, every agreement with the provinces on data sharing comes through my office. I get to see it. I get to help draft it. And we have quite a number of them. So data sharing agreements under Section 12 and 11 of the Stats Act are actually allow us to share information with the provincial governments. So we have measures in place. Trust is not an outcome, but a design objective. I'm really proud of this. This is starting to look good, but let's go beyond that. This is something we've learned from some of you may remember in 2019 with, we were in the news a little bit. We're in the news for two things. One, the census, or its cancellation and then re-enabling, or things like this, which was TransUnion in 2019. We had a project where we're looking at acquiring financial transaction data. The Privacy Commissioner looked into our practices and made a few recommendations in terms of our practices. Out of that, but not necessarily the recommendation, was designing necessity and proportionality, which is a statistical design. It's not illegal, it's not a privacy, it's a statistical approach. So when we're looking at necessity and proportionality, we need to, we need to have a better understanding of how we collect, what we collect, how we use it, how we disclose it. We only need to collect what we need for our statistical programs and not more. This may be seeming simple, but when you're dealing with a large program, longitudinal, designing or choosing the variables for data collection is very important. Proportionality. The proportionality looks into the ethical considerations. We have an entire ethical secretariat that takes a look at that also as part of most of our work. This is fundamental for us. It's not just we're going to design a survey and we're going to collect or through administrative data on a large number of variables. We actually have to demonstrate proportionality and necessity through all of this. I mentioned ethics I wanted to just again mention that we have 6 principles for data ethics, which we apply to this information. Trust and sustainability. Data quality. I'm just going to stop on data quality. Look at the room. Data quality is very important for a statistical organization, right, Shelley? Yeah. So I'm not going to bring in data that's problematic, and by problematic doesn't meet the 6 dimensions for data quality, trustworthiness, etc. Benefits to Canadians. It has to have demonstrable benefits. Canadians need to see this information and how it actually improves their lives. Transparency and accountability. For me, this is very key. I have to be transparent and accountable to Canadians, but my minister, because I'm accountable to Canadians through my minister, through what we publish on our website on the Trust Center. This is very key. And I've kept at the top the privacy framework. I think this is very important. Not only does it define my role, the Chief Privacy Officer, but it also explains how all of our policies are integrated together at Statistics Canada to support that confidentiality and secrecy of the information we collect and manage. So I'm going to stop for a few seconds on this slide. My name is on the website. Isn't that fun? Not just my name, my phone number for, technically, I'm going to bring it out, this phone. I mention that because not only am I the ATIP coordinator, I'm privacy coordinator, but I'm also responsible for responding to Canadians' concerns on the usage of their data. You'll see here my phone number and my name is on the website for microdata linkages. You might have heard of what microdata linkages are. I'm seeing smiles, good. So with all of our holdings, we have a unique perspective of being able to actually do microdata linkages across multiple data holdings, CRA, tax data. I can continue on in terms of that information. We explain how we link those. It's a fairly robust process internally. The policy is actually on our website. I get to approve type C microdata linkages. So I'm going into detail here. Quite a number of those microdata linkages. Shelley and our colleagues are also approving microdata linkages from programs. So we have a robust process internally on how we approve and how we vet those. And they have to also demonstrate necessity and proportionality in terms of how we do linkages and benefits to Canadians. The privacy impact assessments that you see, we have quite a number of them on our website, and they are very detailed in terms of information. They can go on for 80 pages. I don't recommend 80 pages. And we have our policy instruments. If I'm going through all of this, I want to demonstrate, again, transparency and accountability on how we do the work, and also how we foster trust with Canadians through the work we do. The more transparent in terms of our decision-making, how we make decisions internally, the more Canadians will see, okay, so this is routine, this is normal in terms of what we're doing, and this is very important with Canadian society changing over time. Trust in institutions are growing lower and lower. So you want to demonstrate that trust with Canadians. Okay, data governance. Data governance is very important. It's also one of my mandates. We have a very robust data acquisition process, and I use data acquisition because we have administrative data within our purview. So under the Stats Act, I can acquire pretty much any type of data that falls under my act. For that, I actually follow an internal process. We apply necessity and proportionality, obviously, as I previously mentioned, and we have an internal vetting process to actually look at multiple levels of the organization, what type of acquisition or data that we're looking into. This is really important to demonstrate how we approach the subject, how we demonstrate benefits to Canadians, how we approach how we're going to be using it, how long are we going to be retaining it for, who may access this information afterwards, is it going to be in an RDC eventually, okay? These are all important considerations that are part of the design or part of the approval process for our data governance. That touches, as you see here, the data acquisition process, or journey if you prefer. The infographic demonstrates a little bit in terms of how we approach it. Initiate, start a submission process, assess it, necessity, proportionality, privacy impact assessments, now privacy protocols for my type of work, Legal objections. So do I have a legal mandate to do this? So, well, I think I do, but I have to demonstrate this. And this is very important. Which part of the act am I leveraging? Strategies for working with data providers. This is key. I can tell you, sending a letter compelling an organization to hand over data does not work well. Sending a letter compelling an organization to hand over data does not work well. See, I said it twice, okay? You need an engagement. You need a relationship. You need people to have an understanding of what you're trying to accomplish. At some point, it starts off probably at the more granular level, analyst. Eventually, it goes up all the way up to the head of the institution. That's been my experience, where you have an opportunity to explain what we're trying to accomplish. This relationship is key. Without that engagement, without that relationship, compelling people is not going to work. Or if it does not create this lasting relationship. It creates a very problematic relationship from the get-go. So I want to emphasize on this, the engagement is key to these types of data acquisitions. And publications. I have to be transparent to my minister, to parliamentarians, as well as to Canadians in terms of what I'm bringing in. So all of these RFIs, all of these requests are published on our Trust Center. So there's no questions, including details in the IMDb, which is one of our systems online, on how they're being linked or how they're being used within StatCan. So you have, again, transparency. How do I protect it? I think it's very, pardon. I think it needs to be very clear how we protect the information is equally important. Not just through administrative policy instruments, but also, very importantly, I have partners that help us protect the information. I have the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity, the CCCS. They are protecting all government departments from all sorts of threat actors. Don't need to go in details, but all sorts of threat actors. StatCan is also one of the first departments to be fully on a cloud infrastructure, which brings great agility to the agency, but we also mean CCCS, the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity, to protect us from foreign or other threat actors. 5 Safes framework, which my colleague Shelley is going to also talk about, but we also have technical measures. It's not always external threats, so I have to have active monitoring internally to see how the data is being used. I have multiple systems to protect the information once it's in, including access, role-based access control to make sure that people only have access to the information they need to do statistical work. And again, most of that is being de-identified at ingest. So it's working with statistical variables or sensitive statistical information. That's pretty much it. So those are, en grand détail, some of the measures around data governance, as well as protection measures and moving beyond just a system of privacy by design to responsible privacy management. I'll hand it over to my colleague Shelley on the 5 Safes.
Thank you, Pierre. So Pierre is always a tough act to follow. He does such an excellent job of setting the stage. And I think a lot of what he's discussed in respect to privacy, our trust center, necessity, and proportionality is extremely important because it goes back to the fact that at Statistics Canada, we don't make data. We collect data, we compile data, we analyze data, we disseminate data, but it's all based on public trust for Canadian citizens, Canadian businesses to trust in us enough to effectively be able to share their data, share their information for our safeguarding and protection. So when it comes to providing access to data, we really have what we call a continuum of access. So if you go to the Statistics Canada website, you're going to find a multitude of data tables and data products that anyone can access at any time. You can download them, you can look at them, you can copy them. But if you are doing deeper levels of research, or if you are looking for insights that we haven't provided in our aggregate information that we've shared, then we move into the context of microdata. And microdata is data at individual record level. And this is where it becomes extremely important because, as Pierre emphasized, we don't provide anonymous data. You're not anonymized. The information that we hold is very much de-identified. So that means it's removing all types of direct identifiers from a data file. However, particularly with health data, when you're dealing with specific types of data where there could be records with unique events that occur. So if I use, for instance, the Canadian Cancer Registry, and you may have individuals in there who were diagnosed with a rare type of cancer, potentially at a unique age range, or perhaps they've been diagnosed with multiple cancers. These types of rare events, when you're looking at these records, even though we've removed personal identifiers such as name and address, health number, when you look at this, somebody with potentially enough information about my neighbor who's been going through some serious health issues, and we've heard it's been very unique, could potentially look at complete records, look at geography levels, look at age groups, and start to make certain deductions. They may never be able to identify at 100% that this is this person, but they could make an educated guess or an inferred guess. And the last thing we want any Canadian to feel is that other people are looking at their individual records. So it's extremely important in the context of microdata that we truly apply a framework that creates the most secure type of ecosystem in order to fully protect that access, fully protect the privacy, the security of the data, the confidentiality of the data, and of course maintain public trust. So when it comes to microdata level, what we do at Statistics Canada is we use the 5 safes framework as our guiding principles for microdata access. So the 5 safes framework was developed by a professor in Bristol, UK, named Dr. Felix Ritchie. And this is an international framework that's been adopted by a number of countries, including Australia, New Zealand, Mexico, Germany, Norway, France, and others, to really ensure that ultimately people, projects, data, settings, and outputs collectively uphold privacy, security, and public trust. So at Statistics Canada, how we apply the 5 safes framework is really firstly with the aspect of safe people. The question that we ask ourselves are, can the researchers be trusted to use the data in an appropriate manner? Depending on the types of microdata, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, depending on the type of microdata, we may assess these things in a different manner. But some of the things that we're looking for are these researchers coming from accredited organizations? Are the researchers themselves accredited? Have their requests for data been peer reviewed? Are they accessing this data from within Canada? Has the researcher ever been involved in a previous incident related to microdata access? Additionally, to access our most secure type of microdata, which is considered confidential microdata, researchers are required to become deemed employees of Statistics Canada. This is built into our Statistics Act, and as a deemed employee of Statistics Canada, researchers are required to take the Statistics Canada oath of privacy and secrecy. And within this oath, it outlines certain provisions and consequences if they are to violate the oath, and this oath lasts a lifetime. So we say, even after you've moved on, this oath will follow you throughout the duration of your life. In order to become a deemed employee, researchers need to complete a security clearance and be able to pass a security clearance. Additionally, they also need to declare a conflict of interest. There are times when researchers may have conflicts of interest, but they're managed, and they're managed effectively, and information is shared with researchers around their constraints around accessing confidential microdata. We also request copies of the researcher's CV so that we can also verify potentially unidentified conflict of interest. And depending on the research type, they also may need ethics board approval as well, either at a university or organization level. The next question we ask ourselves is really, is the use of data appropriate and lawful? So it's really important that there's value associated with access, particularly to confidential microdata. So what we do is we determine if they're accessing the most strictest type of confidential microdata, they need to submit a research project proposal. This proposal outlines the entirety of their proposed research, the proposed access, its intended uses, and then we evaluate that to determine that this project is actually feasible, it's in the public interest, and it has value for public good. So people often say, well, what doesn't have value for public good? If a private business is coming and they want to use this to leverage potential advertising or targeting of products and things like that, or the purpose is for eventual financial gain, that's not a legitimate reason, and it's not a public interest and public value type of reason for accessing confidential microdata. Additionally, we need to make sure within the framework of their project that outputs would not likely identify an individual. So going back to a little bit of what Pierre was saying earlier, if perhaps populations are so limited that in order to have any utility to the output, we would have to release at a level that could violate confidentiality requirements or privacy restrictions, we can't approve that type of project. We also need to make sure that the data that's being requested is firstly available, and secondly, it's suitable for the project's purposes. And on the flip side to that, when researchers are outputting data, we always go back to the project proposal and make sure that it's in line. So if researchers go off on a little bit of a tangent, oh, wait a second, I found something really interesting, we'll make it clear that's not what you were approved for. You can either go back and amend your project proposal, or we will not release that output to you. The next question, and it's kind of in the middle of the framework, but it's really the most important aspect because it carries a lot of weight, is safe data. So is the level of data detail relevant for the purpose? So when we access requests for confidential microdata, we need to firstly ensure that there's no other mechanism for researchers to receive the output that they're requesting. It goes back to necessity and proportionality. If researchers are looking for descriptive output, so they want to run some frequency or some crosstabs of variables, for us at Statistics Canada, we don't feel like this is an acceptable use of looking at confidential microdata at the record level for producing descriptive output. We really reserve confidential microdata access to the most complex type of analysis possible. So if there are other mechanisms for researchers to receive the type of output they're looking for, we'll steer them into that avenue. And we have different types of microdata, such as public use microdata files, which are available for all researchers to access at any time, directly downloadable from our website, because that data has already been treated in such a way that the data has been modified to meet all of the confidentiality and provisional requirements. So the safe data aspect is extremely important. And I know I've emphasized this before, but again, direct identifiers have all been removed, but the issue does remain with indirect identifiers, knowing enough individual unique characteristics about someone to put this information together to try to make educated guesses. We also need to make sure that statistical disclosure controls have been applied appropriately, and that's why we really steer researchers to other types of microdata access, like public use microdata files or use of real-time remote access, where researchers can remote submit code where they don't actually ever see the actual microdata file directly in order to maintain the security and confidentiality of the data. Safe settings, where is the data being accessed, is extremely important. Within Statistics Canada, our offices at Tunney's Pasture, we have a lot of built-in security, physical and IT controls to prevent the data. Allowing external researchers, while deemed employees of Statistics Canada, may not be coming into a Statistics Canada regional office or head office, we need to make sure we're maintaining the privacy and controls in the settings that researchers are accessing confidential microdata. So for our confidential microdata, we've established research data centers across Canada. We have over 33 research data centers located in universities. Each research data center is considered a mini StatCan premise. I have to make this argument a lot to my colleagues that, wait a second, we have 33 other StatCan premises because the research data centers are staffed by a Statistics Canada employee who will provide oversight to researcher access. Additionally, for non-academic researchers, we also have what used to be called our Federal Research Data Center in Tunney's Pasture, which is now called the Secure Data Access Center for non-academic researchers to also be able to access confidential microdata. In 2021, we launched new options and access solutions for remote access, allowing accredited, approved researchers with eligible and approved projects to be able to access confidential microdata from what we call authorized workspaces, which means a secure environment within their home or their actual work office location. There's a lot of requirements that go around accessing remotely, and we do a lot of extra researcher training related to that as well. Researchers across all types of access are also trained and have to agree to their obligations for responsible access. Lastly, in the framework is the safe outputs, ensuring that any output that's released from a secure environment has been properly vetted and approved by StatCan employees for release into the public domain. So this makes sure that no information at a level that could potentially violate privacy or security requirements are available on a public basis. Additionally, all researchers are trained on each of the vetting rules that associate each of the microdata data files that they're working with, and have to agree to the obligations around the use of data, including no screen captures, no notes, and no verbal discussions outside of a secure environment or with anyone else who is part of their specific research project. And we do enter into specific contracts with those researchers governing this access. So all of these aspects are taken together jointly and separately. Sometimes when you're providing access, if you look at safe data, if this data is safe enough, you actually don't need to worry too much about the settings and the people and the outputs, because you know that the data has already been treated and modified to ensure the confidentiality. For other aspects, you need to take them on a continuum. So with the confidential microdata, it's a little bit from each bucket. So it's all of the aspects of the 5 Safes framework to ensure the protection and confidentiality and the use of the data. Similarly, too, with our real-time remote access, we kind of know the setting is safe because the data remains within Statistics Canada and the code is remotely submitted. So it really just all comes together that a mature governance model applies the framework really on that sliding scale, aligning controls with researcher type, data sensitivity, and the access modality. The 5 Safes will continue to guide the modernization of data access as we explore more flexible access pathways, automations of controls, risk-based monitoring, and innovations. We know with AI that's creating new use cases for working with microdata. And advancing this framework will really allow us to be able to expand our access responsibility and strengthen our transparency and support our growing research community, really while maintaining our highest standards of confidentiality.